gave a very thorough presentation on SMRs. And my presentation is going to focus on SMR's application to ships. And I believe that the questions that I have will not be quite different from what you have in the audience. And I'm going to touch upon the policies and technological issues related to SMR, and I'm going to ask questions as well. So in the field of naval ship architecture, we took interest because we were dealing with this net zero issue. And also in Korea, we have this Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality. And this is the IMO regulations. And in line with these regulations, we have to switch from low carbon to zero carbon, ultimately. So in the field of shipbuilding, this is the trend change. By 2030, for instance, we can expect the emergence of net carbon-free ships. And also going forward, we can expect that most of the ships will produce no CO2. So looking at the trends with carbon-free vessels, application of SMRs is attracting attention in the field. And at my organization, we are also studying how this technology can be applied in an economical way. So why does a shipbuilding company interested in the use of SMRs? Well, the concept of nuclear ships is not a whole new thing. For aircraft carriers and submarines, this is already being used. And when we replaced fuel rods, they say we had some accidents. But in reality, for a long time, we managed to use these technologies and fuels safely. In the US and in Germany, there are cases of these nuclear ships. Savannah of the US, Otuan of Germany, and the Japanese case, you can see that these are nuclear-fueled ships that were actually built. And also, these ships are in operation, even though the history is not very long. And in Russia, there are icebreakers with light water reactors, and these ships are in operation. In Russia, these icebreakers with reactors, well, these reactors were built back in 2019, and they're still in operation. And regarding the application of SMR to merchant ships, well, even though there are some applications in the market, regarding the use of SMR for merchant ships, there are some limitations, and also we have to think about the international regulations. And currently, countries are developing related technologies in line with the regulations. And from the perspectives of vessels, what are the major issues that we need to address? First, about the advantage. It generates zero greenhouse gases. And also, fuel economy is great, so in terms of OPEX, it's advantageous. But what are the weaknesses? Well, reception by the public and public awareness, well, there is a lingering issue. And in maintaining reactors, we need safe facilities and personnel who can manage these facilities safely. So that can be thorny. And also, it needs upfront investment for installing such facilities. And as the vessels are equipped with reactors, we need the infrastructure, and we have to deal with regulations and rules which are not fully resolved. So regarding the issue of these nuclear-fueled vessels, well, the biggest question is, are they safe? Well, regarding this question, I would say that this is being applied to many vessels around the world. And also in the private sector, we see 10 of these vessels. So currently, the technology is not perfect, but to a certain point, the technology and safety of it is proven. Second, is it economical? So according to the Society of Nuclear Power and Shipbuilding Industries, when they looked at large container ships, it looked at return on investment. And at that time, the analysis said that the promising analysis at that time was that 10 years in order to enjoy the return on the investment. And going forward, I believe that we can reduce the time frame with the introduction of carbon levies and so on. So economic viability and safety are the two big major issues that we need to address. And regarding these two issues, I believe that we do have sufficient level of technological development to cover these. And second, about the vessels with SMRs mounted, if you look at the international cases, there are many research activities that can change the paradigm. So on far right, this is the icebreaker from Russia. And this is the MRX, which is being studied by Japan. This is the reactor of Japan. So it's not just existing icebreakers, but this can be also mounted onto the container ships. And I think this technology is what you're familiar with if you work in the shipbuilding industry. But the first case, this is announced by the Norwegian Olstein, equipped with MSR. And in Norway, in order to change the paradigm for vessels, just like they did for the automotive industry, by the time we reach 2050, most of the vessels will be fully electrified. That's the forecast. And in that case, we need the charging infrastructure. And MSR can be used in this scenario to charge and provide electricity. And for those vessels that travel around the polar regions and Norway, these are what's being pursued by Norway. And the one in the middle is in the UK, Earth 300. So this is also a kind of a research vessel. And as we looked at in the previous session, it's about 300-meter yacht type. And this vessel also is equipped with MSR, according to the current plan. And currently, in building this ship, the total budget is about 1 trillion won. And the nuclear-powered vessels, well, we will have to talk about licensing and approvals, but currently we do not have any standards for them. So we are thinking eco-friendly fuels and factoring in these types of fuels. And also there is active research activities going on regarding the propulsion systems. So when we mount SMRs onto the ships, what kind of propulsion systems do we need? So on the right-hand side, you can see the concept map from Russia. So this is for the missile cruise ship, a concept map for that. And this uses not only nuclear power, but a gas turbine for a propulsion system. And when a Russian naval vessel enters the seas of another nation, and there can be a rejection of port entry. In that case, it can turn off nuclear power, and then it can turn on its gas turbine to enter the port. Previously, on the previous slide, we looked at the case of VMT, the British case. So what I'm trying to say here is that we can come up with a hybrid propulsion system. So when there's a vessel using this SMR technology, we can find a halfway in a form of a hybrid system to pursue being eco-friendly. And at the same time, we can store ESS so that we can approach this issue in a more eco-friendly way. Next, about approvals and licensing. In Korea, well, currently we do not have regulations regarding vessels with SMRs. Relevant parties and organizations have to work on developing these licenses. And if you look at IMO, even though they do have regulations on nuclear power, they don't deal with specifics of technology related to SMRs. And regarding the new type or fourth generation SMRs like MSR, we believe that we will need a strategy for licensing and approving these new different types of vessels. So even though we have existing nuclear power related regulations at the moment, when we add these new technologies of SMR onto vessels, well, there are many places or room to fill in when it comes to the regulations of SMRs. And I believe that research institutes, including my organization and naval architects around the world, and the registers and Nuclear Safety Research Institute, all these different players can work together to deal with the issue of licensing and approval. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation. And as I am on the podium, I do have a question for Dr. Park about the things that I mentioned during my presentation about the safety of technology according to my personal view, compared to light water reactors. I believe the fourth generation reactors are much more safer. So I believe that we do have safe technology. But for me, two biggest challenges include how this can be received by the public. So that's the first thing that I need to prove and deal with. And also, when we build these vessels with SMRs, what would be the regulations and license regulations that we have to consider